During my back recovery, I could barely bend over to put on socks. My wife, seeing me struggle, mocked me. "You're a useless appliance. I don't know why I even come home." I smiled and said, "I'll be fine." Last night, she regretted her insults. "I'm 38 years old, and 6 weeks ago, I had spinal surgery for a herniated disc that I got from lifting a box that was too heavy. I've worked with my body for almost 20 years, so the first month of recovery was hell. I couldn't even get to the bathroom without feeling a pain that twisted me inside. Even today, bending over minimally feels like knives being stabbed into my back. By the 5th week, I noticed some improvement, but I still couldn't do something as basic as putting on my socks without sweating, grimacing, and using the hook they lent me at the hospital. One afternoon, my wife, Pamela, 36, walked into the bedroom and stood in front of me, watching with her arms crossed as I struggled against those cursed socks, and she let it out without blinking. "You look like a broken gadget, useless and taking up space." I froze. She was serious. She was comparing me to a broken appliance. I thought perhaps she was joking with that dark humor some couples practice, but her face showed absolute disgust. And when I didn't answer, she added with more weight, "Seriously, why do I even come home if you're good for nothing?" I tried to disguise the pain with a smile. I assured her everything would improve, but inside, something broke. Our marriage had been a minefield for some time. As soon as I got injured and her flow of my checks stopped, Pamela began to show me an unknown side. Eye rolls every time I asked for help, complaints about medical expenses, constant reminders that she was now carrying all the weight. I felt like a useless burden, but hearing her verbalize it was different. It was the last straw. She left for work, and I stayed with the socks on the floor, wondering when she stopped seeing me as her partner and started seeing me as a broken piece of junk. "In sickness and in health" turned into, "Are you productive or a nuisance?" I called my brother Jarrett, told him everything, and his reaction gave me the key. That look of surprise told me it wasn't normal. "Brother, this is emotional abuse," he blurted out. "You wouldn't even talk to a dog like that, much less your husband, newly operated." Jarrett helped me see that it wasn't an isolated episode. All those jokes about my uselessness to her friends, the comparisons with other husbands who had a real career, it all added up. Jarrett's question was direct. "If Vicky spoke to me like that, what would you tell me?" Vicky, his wife, is perhaps the sweetest person I know. Without hesitation, I told him he should stand up for himself, that no one deserves that treatment. Suddenly it was clear. I needed evidence. I installed a voice recorder on my cell phone. The next day, it didn't take long to capture another gem. Pamela returned from shopping with bags overflowing, despite our tight budget due to my medical bills. And when I asked her for a glass of water for my physical therapy, she snapped that she hoped I would grow up already, that it was like taking care of a child. In the following week, I collected more evidence. Calls with friends where she described me as damaged goods, reproaches for not working enough, as if recovery were a vacation. And meanwhile, I discovered $1 million transfers on her laptop from our emergency fund to her personal account, used for spas, expensive meals, and online shopping. Still, I didn't confront her. I called my mother, Mabel, from whom I have always received brutal honesty. After telling her everything, she confirmed that my marriage was crossing the line into toxic territory. Marriage is for supporting each other when one falls, not for kicking the other while they are injured, she told me. Thanks to her, I contacted a lawyer who guided me on how to protect myself. I changed my disability payments to a new account, copied important documents, and continued to accumulate evidence of her double dealing. The hardest part was feigning normalcy, continuing to smile, thanking her for the minimal help, and acting as if I didn't see her contempt. Yesterday marked 3 weeks since that broken appliance phrase. 3 weeks of planning, documenting, and accepting that our marriage was over. Pamela returned late last night with obvious traces of a happy hour and started her discourse again about how unfair life had been by leaving her with a half-husband. I nodded, recording everything with my phone, knowing that every word of hers reinforced my decision. Sometimes I think it's crazy, but the clarity I've gained is the biggest victory. I finished putting on my socks a while ago, and with them on, I turned off the recorder. Now I know that the next step is the only fair one, to rebuild my life, free from the person who treats me like a broken piece of junk. I wish I hadn't woken up from the operation. I could have collected the insurance and started over with someone who really knows how to support me. As soon as she heard my proposal, she expected me to break down or burst into tears. Instead, I looked at her serenely and said, "I think we need to talk about our future." Seeing her face as she realized I wouldn't tolerate that situation anymore is an image I will never forget. That was last night. Today, everything changes. I made some calls and initiated several procedures. My brother will come to give me a hand with the next steps. She has no idea what's coming, but believe me, she's going to regret every word. I'll keep you posted when I can. But for now, remember this. Being physically injured doesn't mean someone can break your spirit. Update. First of all, thanks to everyone who commented and sent me messages after my last post. It helped me know that I wasn't exaggerating in labeling that washing machine jibe as emotional abuse. It took less time for you to accept that label than it took me, but you were right. That's what it was. 2 weeks have passed since then, and although I'm still processing everything, I promised an update. So here it is. The next morning I got up early, despite not having slept a wink. My back pain intensifies with stress, but I felt a strange calm, like when you decide to jump into the void after years of hesitation. Pamela went to work without worrying about me for a second. That was our new normal. I spent the morning talking with my sister Vicky, who showed up at home with breakfast and a notebook in hand, ready to draw up a plan. Hours later, checking our finances on my laptop, we discovered something worse than expected. In addition to transfers to her personal account, we found a credit card in my name that I had no idea about, with months of expenses at expensive restaurants, while she claimed to be working late, online purchases, and even a weekend trip with friends that her company covered. All of this was financed with our money, and she was making me feel guilty about the high cost of my pain medication. The most outrageous thing was finding movements in the account where she kept the funds designated for our mother's assisted living facility. Mom will never know if I can help it. Vicky documented everything. Screenshots, cloud backups, and helped me schedule an appointment with a divorce lawyer for next week. There's no turning back. That same night, when Pamela returned, I initiated the first phase of what my brother Jarrett jokingly dubbed Operation Broken Appliance. I would no longer be the emotional punching bag. I would simply show her the value of a damaged product. Even with my injury, I was still taking care of the bills, maintenance calls, appointment tracking, online grocery orders, the relationship with the landlord, all the invisible work that keeps a house running. She thought that with a couple of occasional dinners and my paycheck, she contributed enough to the marriage. It was time to illustrate it. When she asked about dinner, I shrugged. I didn't order anything today. She made a sarcastic comment about not being able to even manage a food delivery, and I nodded. I guess I'm pretty useless now. The next morning, the shower drain was clogged, something I usually fixed in 10 minutes, and I explained that I couldn't bend over for that task. Maybe you should call a plumber. She scoffed at the expense and ended up leaving for her mother's house to shower before going to work. Day after day, I stopped doing everything I previously managed. I didn't pay the Wi-Fi bill, and the service was cut off in the middle of her favorite show. I ignored the strange noise from the car until it struggled to start again. I didn't place the grocery order or take out the trash. With every small domestic disaster, her frustration grew, and I simply reminded her calmly of her own words. Broken appliance. Remember, don't expect much from a damaged item. The real wake-up call came one Sunday night when the toilet in our only bathroom clogged. I always grabbed the plunger, regardless of the pain, because that's what partners do. That time, I limped over to my brother's house to use his bathroom and stayed there all night, leaving her with the mess, 12 text messages, and 6 missed calls that I didn't answer. The situation escalated when she discovered I had transferred my disability benefits to my new personal account. She came home early, her face red, showing me the banking app and demanding explanations. I calmly pointed out that the money was mine, the same money she thought was ours, and that for months she had been diverting to her account. At that moment, her expression shifted from anger to strange panic. For the first time since the surgery, she seemed to understand that I was on shaky ground. Meanwhile, I attended the consultation with the lawyer. He explained that documenting emotional abuse and financial infidelity weighs heavily in divorce proceedings, and my medical condition, which she had ridiculed, also didn't favor her. Furthermore, he confirmed that my recordings are legal in our state, as it is a one-party consent state. He advised me to continue accumulating evidence but warned against completely emptying joint accounts, so it wouldn't look like financial abandonment. Good advice. I'm not looking to sink her, just to protect myself and maintain my dignity. At my follow-up medical review, the doctor told me my back was healing well despite the stress. Attitude and emotional state influence recovery, he commented and asked if everything was all right at home. I answered with a word I now know by heart. No. For the first time, I was completely honest about what was happening. I added a note to my medical history about the domestic stress that was hindering my recovery. More evidence for the divorce process. Last weekend was the breaking point. Pamela's car wouldn't start, a problem I had been postponing. She had also missed an important brunch with her friends, and upon returning home, she burst in furiously, accusing me of neglecting maintenance, something that had always been my responsibility. I looked at her in silence and asked her how she expected a broken appliance to fix an engine. Those words hung in the air. I saw a flicker on her face for an instant. Perhaps recognition, maybe guilt, but it immediately turned into defense. Then she started listing all the sacrifices she had made for me during my convalescence, that she had been the one working while I did nothing, that it was unfair for her to carry all the weight. It was at that moment that I played the recording where she clearly said, "I wish he hadn't woken up from the operation so I could collect the insurance and find a real man." I had pretended so she could hear herself and understand what she had become. Pamela paled, burst into tears, and then ignited with anger again, the usual cycle of someone who feels exposed at their worst. A long and exhausting conversation followed, the most honest we had had in months. She admitted that she resented becoming the primary source of income. She confessed to feeling trapped, comparing herself to friends' partners who surpassed her in salary and lifestyle, as if my injury were a personal grievance against her social standing. I let her talk, and when she finished, I showed her the documents my lawyer had prepared. At first, she thought it was another ploy to scare her, but when she read the paperwork, something changed. Reality caught up with her. That night, she slept at her mother's house. The next day, she returned different, subdued, almost remorseful. She started making small gestures, bringing me water without me asking, offering to help with my rehabilitation. Too late, but curious to observe. Yesterday, while I was working, my brother and sister came to pack her things. We only collected her personal effects, neatly boxed, and left them in the garage along with a note explaining that I needed space and believed it was better for her to stay with her mother until legal matters were resolved. I also changed the Wi-Fi password, a trivial detail, perhaps insignificant, but tremendously satisfying. When she returned and saw her belongings in the garage, she lost control, ringing the doorbell insistently for 20 minutes, calling me all sorts of insults and threatening legal action. Good luck with that. When none of her outbursts worked, she collapsed in sobs on the doorstep. I watched the scene on the security camera with strange indifference. Neither satisfaction nor fury, just emptiness, like watching the ruin of a stranger. Today, my phone is overflowing with her messages that oscillate between apologies and new threats. I haven't answered a single one. My lawyer recommended complete silence, except through official channels. The funniest thing is that my back pain seems more bearable. The doctor said stress amplifies physical suffering, and I guess he was right. For now, I'm staying with Jarrett, who helps me with my mobility. And my sister is looking for a small, accessible apartment, My mother calls every day, worried but understanding. At 38, it's strange to have to start life over. I never thought about starting from scratch, but I prefer that to spending another day being someone's broken appliance. Finally, I feel strong enough to update. It's strange to look in the mirror after months and not recognize yourself, not in a profound sense, but in the everyday. The guy who couldn't put on his own socks without crying from pain now goes for 30-minute walks daily. The same one who silently accepted being called useless now stands up for himself without hesitation. Change comes slowly, until suddenly it's obvious. For those who are just joining, I'm the man whose wife called him useless while he recovered from back surgery. In the last update, I shared that I moved out, initiated the divorce, and that Pamela had a meltdown on our porch after seeing her things packed in the garage. Since then, there have been more twists. The week I settled in at Jarrett's house, the furious messages stopped, and strangely sweet texts appeared, as if someone had kidnapped my real wife and replaced her with a chatbot programmed for tenderness. Do you need anything? Do you remember the good times? The famous love bombing that my new therapist explained to me. I didn't reply to anything. Everything was saved in my evidence folder. Then came the flying monkeys. First, it was her mother, imploring that Pamela was just stressed and that it hadn't been that terrible. I replied honestly that I had recordings of every insult and that wish for me not to wake up. Dead silence on the other end of the line. Then came mutual friends, some worried, others replicating Pamela's distorted version. I got tired of clarifying one by one and created a private chat. I thanked them for their interest. I asked them not to speak ill of her to gain sympathy and blocked those who insisted. 3 weeks after I moved out, I received a message from Pamela's sister. Santiago was hosting a dinner and had inadvertently invited both of us. I thought about not going, but I had another idea. It was the perfect opportunity for the recordings. I arrived a little late. I saw the fright on Pamela's face when I walked in and the confusion of Santiago and his spouse when they saw me. I greeted him. Recovery is going well. Physical therapy finally allows me to move without so much pain. The evening was immensely uncomfortable. Pamela feigned normalcy, the role of the attentive wife. Are you missing anything? Another cushion? While her relatives exchanged bewildered looks. After dessert, Santiago asked me how things were going, just before Pamela tried to interrupt with another invented version. I said calmly that we were getting divorced. Silence took over the room. Pamela immediately tried to minimize the situation, telling everyone how my back pain had depressed me and made me irrational, and how she had only been supportive during my recovery. Then I took out my phone and, without animosity, warned that I hadn't come to put on a show, but that I wouldn't allow Pamela to rewrite history either. I looked at Santiago. He nodded with a look of sincere concern. I played 3 recordings. First, the whining allusion to the broken appliance, where she complained about working so much while I did nothing. Then, the toughest fragment where she confessed that she wished I hadn't woken up from the surgery to keep the insurance money. I will never forget their looks. Santiago with tears in his eyes, his wife almost hiding under the table, and Pamela pale, as if she had seen a ghost upon recognizing herself in her own voice in front of those who loved her so much. When I finished, I put away my phone and waited. Santiago asked if that was really her voice. Pamela suggested that the recordings could be manipulated, but my brother-in-law, an audio production expert, shook his head. They are authentic. I stood up, thanked them for dinner. Santiago hugged me at the door and, in a whisper, apologized for everything. I told him he was not to blame at all. The next morning, my phone exploded with messages from Pamela's family. After I left, she had an emotional collapse, admitting to the recordings but blaming it all on the stress of being the sole provider while I healed. Her family didn't believe her. Meanwhile, the financial discovery process progressed. It was revealed that she had not only emptied much of our joint savings, but had also accumulated more than $20,000 in credit card debt in the last year, expenses I was completely unaware of. designer clothes, expensive cosmetics, weekend getaways she pretended were work trips. My lawyer was dizzy. In our state, hiding assets and deceiving one's spouse about finances is strictly punished in a divorce, especially when one spouse is medically vulnerable. The turning point came in mediation. Pamela showed up with a belligerent lawyer, determined to fight for her share of our assets. My lawyer responded by presenting more recordings and the financial evidence. It was like watching someone deflate in real time. After 4 hours, Pamela accepted a settlement practically identical to my demands. My full share of the legitimate assets, no alimony, and she would take care of the secret debts she had generated. Judge Harris signed everything last week. 8 years of marriage dissolved in a 10-minute hearing. While all this was happening, my back was improving significantly. My physical therapist comments that I'm healing faster than expected now that the stress has evaporated. I can now bend down to put on my own socks. A small but gigantic triumph for me. I found a modest apartment with an elevator, no stairs. Jarrett and Vicky helped me move last weekend. It's nothing luxurious, but it's mine. No one here calls me useless or a broken thing. My mother came yesterday, brought homemade food, and took care of hanging pictures, assembling furniture, and even configuring my home automation system so I can turn on the lights without straining my back. She didn't utter a word about Pamela. She never sympathized with her. Instead, she cared for me with affection. 2 days ago, I ran into Pamela at the supermarket. Awkward doesn't even begin to describe it. She looked like someone who hadn't slept in weeks. She tried to start a conversation. She asked how I was. I was courteous, but brief. "I'm fine," I said, which was true. As I left, she managed to confess that she missed me and that her therapist had opened her eyes to her toxicity. I nodded in agreement and wished her well with the therapy. I didn't feel resentment or satisfaction at her pain. I felt nothing, like talking to a distant acquaintance from high school. That night, browsing Netflix looking for something to watch, it dawned on me that after all this, I no longer feel anger, neither towards Pamela nor towards myself, for having endured her snubs for so long. I am free. My therapist says that clinging to anger only harms you. I haven't reached forgiveness yet, but I'm bordering on indifference, which is also an achievement. It's been 11 weeks since the surgery. The doctor tells me my recovery is miraculous. I started swimming at the local gym, the best exercise for my back. Sometimes I notice looks in the locker room. The surgical scar catches their attention, but I don't care. Those marks are proof that I survived. I spend my days at my own pace. I joined a support group for those suffering from back pain. I discovered it through a Reddit thread, and I rediscovered the joy of cooking simple recipes that don't require me to stand for too long. I also downloaded a dating app, though I haven't opened it yet, one step at a time. Vicky thinks I should write about my experience in a self-help blog. I'm not sure about that. But venting here has already been therapeutic. Knowing I'm not alone and that others overcame similar situations makes a difference. Last night, a commercial on TV advertised a smart refrigerator that does almost everything in your house except cook the food, and I burst out laughing in my living room. That was me to Pamela. The appliance that serves until it breaks down. Not a person with feelings and self-worth. She thought I was just a broken apparatus taking up space, when in reality, I was the foundation that kept everything standing. Now, every day, I live with that truth. I am no longer an appliance.